Hello and welcome to Oweleketv. I am Confidence Oko. Oweleketv had an exclusive interview with Barrister Manta, a renowned legal practitioner in northwestern Nigeria. He has been a legal practitioner for 38 years and he is also a public affairs analyst. Speaking on Oweleketv's program Political Angle, Barrister Manta spoke on the ongoing internal leadership tussle in Labour Party. He talked about the effect of the tussle on the presidential tribunal hearing. Please listen.
Today we are going to be talking about the internal crisis in Labour Party and the implication on the party, on the electoral tribunal, and the implication of this crisis in the body polity of the country. And together with me here, we are having a legal icon, a man who has seen it all. He has spent 38 years in the profession. And he has also been involved in politics. If you have been involved in matters of legal affairs for over 38 years, it means you've gone too far, way far. So we have a legal icon, a man that has been there, has seen it all and has done it all in the legal profession. He's also good in politics as well. He's also a public commentator on national affairs. We have with me here the honor of welcoming Barrister Manta. You know very well that you're a public commentator, and we're also aware that you know much about the crisis in the Labour Party. So can you please tell us what actually is the cause of this very crisis, the internal crisis that we're having today in the Labour Party?
Well, let me say that, as you are aware, the Labour Party crisis is in court. So I'm not going to go so deep. I will only talk in general terms since the issue is sub judice. You have to understand, within our political environment, the Labour Party has been there before. So you have to ask yourself, why now? Labour Party has been there, but why is the crisis now? Then you understand that wherever the political party platform has become, how do I put it, has become tenable, has become plausible, has become attractive, there's bound to be some jostlings that will eventually turn into crisis of some sort. So the crisis has both internal and external dimensions. The external dimensions are not difficult to fathom. You know, the obedient movement and the elections, the success that Labour Party recorded. This was not expected by the political establishment. For a long time, we have had only two major political parties. The third force has never been there. So it has always been between two major political parties. And a lot of the establishment expected that to continue. But then you see the Labour Party came up and made a wonderful showing and threatened existing political arrangement in Nigeria. In the past, the Labour Party and other fringe parties were there, but nobody really gave them a serious thought because they did not challenge the dominant political parties.
So, sir, you are inferring that there is a gang-up by other parties and probably by the government of the day against Labour Party.
I will go further to say that the interest of the two major political parties converge in seeing that Labour Party is cut to size. because it threatens both of them and either of them in their traditional strongholds and nationally. So to that extent, it will be good for the ruling party, it will be good for the main opposition party to see that Labour Party is brought down.
All right, Barrister. The main opposition party, the PDP, seems to be in a state of coma right now. So how will it have this power to start interfering with the runnings of the Labour Party? Sourcing to say that it should be the ruling party that is actually responsible for the crisis.
I said the interest of the two major parties, that the ruling party and the opposition, main opposition, converge as far as the rising profile of Labour Party is concerned. The degree to which each of them is capable of promoting crisis or an attempt to cut Labour Party to size varies with their strength. Obviously, the ruling party, with their power, with their money, with their influence, are better placed to influence. But that is not to say the main opposition party cannot also do its own part. You have to understand that they may be down, but they are not out. They still wield considerable influence within the country.
All right, sir. Let's go back to the legal angle of the whole thing. Now, the court declared that Lamidi Apapa is the national chairman of Labour Party. And we can see that over 28 chairmen, state chairmen of Labour Party have declared their loyalty to Julius Aburi. And they are also saying that it is unconstitutional for the courts to dabble into the internal affairs of the party. So, what will be your take, sir? Who is the actual national chairman of the Labour Party? Is it Apapa or Aburi?
Well, like I said, the matter is sub judice, but let me give a general view for people to understand the situation in Labour Party right now. Number one, there is no dispute that Aburi had been chairman until the crisis erupted. Now, when you say the court has declared Lamidi Apapa as the national chairman, it's not entirely correct. Number one, whatever issue you can say, at the best, he will be the acting national chairman. But remember that when a matter or a ruling is made and you are not satisfied, you have the right to appeal. And not only that, you have the right to ask for a stay of execution of that ruling. Aburi has appealed against the ruling of the High Court. They have followed it up with an application for stay of execution of that ruling. Where that happens, you are entitled to continue until the court decides on your application for stay of execution of this ruling.
Barrister, thanks for the clarification. So for now, Aburi remains the chairman.
For now, on the state of the legal proceedings, Aburi can continue to act as the national chairman.
All right, sir.
Pending when the court will rule on his application for stay of execution of his ruling.
How do you see this having this very tussle between Aburi and Apapa having an effect on the ruling at the tribunal? How will it affect the ruling of the tribunal?
Well, I cannot say that it will not affect the Labour Party case. I also cannot say that it will affect it in a serious way, Because in the tribunal today, there are two parties that came to the tribunal. The Labour Party as a party and Peter Obi as a candidate. Either of them or both of them can maintain the case in the tribunal. Assuming for the sake of argument that Lamidi Apapa
withdraws his own case.
Directs the withdrawal of the case on behalf of the Labour Party. That will not be the end of the case, because he will not have the right to withdraw the case of Peter Obi, who is a party in the case, in his own right.
All right, sir. Barrister, if you could recall, in 1962, there was this crisis in the action group between Ladoke Akintola and Chief Obafemi Awolowo. And it turned out that this very crisis led to the split of action group, the rigging of the 1964 elections, general elections, and then subsequently the coup d'etat. Do you draw any parallels between the actions of the crisis in the Labour Party today and the crisis that happened in the 60s in the action group? A lot of Nigerians are making inferences that there is similarity with that. Do you agree to that?
I would not go that far, because the scenario is not the same. If you go back to the issues of Akintola and Chief Awolowo, you know we had regional governments then, and these regional governments were principally along ethnic lines. So the problem in the West with Akintola opposing Awolowo and trying to align with forces that were perceived to be outside the ethnic nationality of the West then, was what exacerbated the problem. It catapulted it into a survivor issue. That is not the present situation we have now. That party was more or less a regional party then. Labour Party today, no matter what anybody says, has acquired national
prominence.
National prominence.
All right, Barrister, I will still like to have you on this very issue. If you look at it, after the presidential elections, which Labour won in the Southwest, particularly Lagos, there was this tribal sentiment that came in. And some people, MC Oluomo and the rest, were saying, if you are not Yoruba, if you are not from Lagos, don't go out and vote. And here in the North, the ethnic and religious tag was placed on Peter Obi. And you just said in 1960, there was that ethnic tinge to the whole thing. Don't you still see that ethnic tinge happening?
I don't see it that way. The introduction of tribal and ethnic sentiments and attaching it to Labour Party is very unfortunate. Well, we have the saying, give a dog a bad name in order to hang it. You are here, you know how Labour Party was there. Nobody took them serious until the obedient movement came into it, until Obi emerged as its presidential candidate. And then the obedient movement lined up behind it. A lot of forces, like I said, felt threatened. Now you know what happened in Lagos. Since 1999, the Jagaba has presided over the affairs of Lagos. Even while he is no longer the governor, we all know that he still is the godfather of politics in Lagos. Now, for the first time, somebody came to upstage him. A lot of people, and that person is not from his ethnic group. So it is bound to have some sentiments. A lot of people there felt bad about it and began this ethnic campaign, which is very, very unfortunate. I expected the leader himself to come out and speak against those kind of sentiments. Because
did he speak against the sentiments?
I did not hear it, and that is why I am very disappointed. I expected Tinubu to be the first to come out and speak out against it, because he has also benefited from the votes of what you would call the obedience in past elections. He has benefited. They have voted for him before. So when this one came, and nobody should really begrudge them, because there was a sense of entitlement that, look, the Easterners should have the presidency. And it stood to reason that the people of the East, not just in the Eastern, in the Southeast states, everywhere they are, to have affinity with that ticket. They had this sense of entitlement that it was their turn to have the presidency, and most of us sympathize with them.
All right, Barrister. Yes, like you said, actually the Southeast should be entitled to in some quarters, according to, because the Southwest had its turn with the presidency and the vice president.
Yes.
See, and the North also, the presidency and the vice presidency during Atiku. Now, the Southeast felt it is their turn. And a lot of Nigerians are saying that if it is your turn, you don't need to fight. You need to build bridges across. Have the Southeasterners built bridges across?
Well, I don't know what they mean by building bridges.
They mean you have to dialogue.
Let me land. If there's anybody who is pan-Nigerian in this country today, it's the Southeasterner.
Barrister, you are not from the Southeast.
I'm not from the Southeast.
Particularly tell us where you come from.
I'm from Benue State. I'm a Tiv person. But I want you to know that if there's anybody, any tribe that is pan-Nigerian, it is the Southeasterners, it's the Igbos.
Indulge us in that, sir.
They are everywhere. They come to every village, every nook and cranny of Nigeria. They are there, and they carry out their business. They build their houses, they build their industries, they build their businesses. Who else has that survivor elsewhere? They come here and they feel at home. They go to Sokoto and they feel at home. They go anywhere and they feel at home. So when people are saying they should build bridges, please, let us understand that the first priority of Nigeria today is to build a nation. We are not building a nation. We should first lay the foundation to build a nation. Give everybody a sense of belonging. Assure everybody that he is part of this country, that he can aspire to the highest office in the land. And most of those people who are talking about bridges, they make campaign that the North has ruled and he should go to the South. Is it not ironic that when he comes to the South, you do not apply the same principle? That he should go in the South, he should go to the part of the South that has not had it. I listened to the campaign of Jagaba somewhere in the Southwest when he spoke in Yoruba, and he said that it is not good for the Yoruba to take the bead of their son and tie it to the waist of another person. With due respect, it is more or less like he stole the bead from the child of another person. Because truly, if we wanted to stabilize this country, to make this country have that sense of belonging everywhere, this presidency should have gone to the Southeast.
Despite that fact, there are words on the street that though Jagaban became the president-elect, but Peter Obi remains the president that the Nigerians electorate actually had in mind? I don't know if you've heard that word, and I would like to ask you, what is the meaning of that?
Well, you know, a lot of people believe that Peter Obi won the election.
How true is that, sir?
As a lawyer, I cannot sit here and say yes or no.
Don't forget, sir, you're a political commentator.
Exactly. I'm talking on the legal frame, first of all, before I come to the political side. As a lawyer, I cannot sit here and say yes, Peter Obi won, or Peter Obi did not win, based on the case in court. Facts will have to be established before one can reach a definitive legal conclusion that he won. But when you come to the political side, I've been in politics myself, just that I stopped to concentrate on my practice. I've done politics, even in this state. I see the sentiment, I see the movement, I see the enthusiasm, and it's something that we have not seen in the country for a long time. A lot of people came out. A lot of people actually came out to support Peter Obi. That is the truth. And between the various sectors in the country, you can see that he performed well in the southeast, he performed well in the middle belt, he performed well in the south-south. He did not perform very well in the upper north, that is not west in particular. So it is difficult to gauge. But when you see the amount of votes, for instance, that Jagaba won, 8-point-something million, and you see the votes that Atiku scored, and you see the votes that Obi scored, you can be forgiven. I was saying that if you see the enthusiasm, the movement, which at the beginning a lot of people wrote it off, but during the election, they were taken aback that it was real. One can be forgiven if they say Peter Obi won.
Right. So, will you say Peter Obi has actually done much to command this much vote from the voters? So what makes him tick?
Yes, I can say that when you are talking about a person, he should be relative to his opponents. Between the major candidates that we have, in my own opinion, none of them comes close to Peter Obi in terms of what we need in the country now. I will give you an example. Number one, we need to demystify governance and government in Nigeria. Let the average Nigerian know that the governance and the government are their own. How do I mean? As of today, you see the governors behaving like emperors. See the president behaving like he is not from among us, or we are not the people who elected him. We want somebody who will come and say, look, all these vested interests that are preventing the country from moving forward should be cut to size. And he has done that in Anambra State. He cut his convoy. I was here when he came for MBA conference. He was alone. There's no paraphernalia of office around him. He went to Abuja and cut down on the cooks. They are having 30-something cooks in Anambra State guest house. For what? Like, when the president was going to Anambra and they gave him a bill of 400 and something million, he rejected it. They were to book a whole hotel to take care of the president and his entourage. And he said no. He gave the president his own bedroom. He and his wife went to a hotel, a cheap hotel, and slept. The vehicles that they say will convey the president, he got it from a neighboring state. At the end, he spent less than 1/4 of the budget that the civil servants and politicians are giving him in a bid just to steal, to embezzle public funds. This is what is going on, and that is what I mean by demystifying governance. We have to put these things in perspective. Why should a governor take 500 million of public funds and touch somebody? What kind of democracy is that? You are governor, you are holding the governors in trust. The money, the public funds of the state, you are to use it in trust for the people. If it is in court, we will say you have abused the trust. If you spend the money anyhow, if you misappropriate it. But we see governors doing anything they want with the money. The governor goes to the extent of every single kobo of the state spent. The governor must know about it and approve of it. Why should it be? So we have taken this government as something extraordinary. And for that reason, it has become a do or die matter.
All right, sir.
One final thing.
Okay.
When you are elected into public office, it becomes a passport to wealth and riches. Whether it's in the House, whether it's as a governor in the executive or in the legislature. That should not be. We must demystify this governance and make it work for the average Nigerian. That will be the beginning. That is when we have started to lay the foundation.
And that is what
for development. That is what Obi represents. So when people are saying Obi cannot do this, if we start on that path of laying a good foundation for good governance, then we can know that at a point we will reach where we want to go. That's the most important thing.
All right. To you, one final question. As a legal practitioner, what chances do you think Obi has at the Presidential Election Tribunal?
That is a question that is difficult for somebody to sit here and say as a lawyer.
But does the odds favor him?
Let me put it this way. I am not participating in that petition as a lawyer. But I know I have done a lot of election petitions myself. So I know the difficulty, both in terms of time frame to prepare your case, particularly when it affects the whole country. That's the presidential election. It's an awfully difficult process to get the election to be overturned. The best way is the legal issues of qualification. When you come down to the matter of whether somebody has got more votes to be declared, that's a bit more difficult. As of now, based on the decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Osun State, I don't know what is coming to happen, because the INEC, when these petitions were filed by Obi and PDP, INEC said they wanted to reconfigure the Beavers machine to use it for the gubernatorial and House of Assembly elections. And there was argument in the tribunal that no, what of the data in the Beavers? INEC came to court and said, we are going to transfer the data from Beavers to our back-end server. So no data will be lost. Now the Supreme Court has, in the case of Osun, say no, the data or evidence from the back-end server is not reliable. That the only way you can prove overvoting is from the beavers. So if the beavers have been wiped clean for the purpose of using them to do the gubernatorial election, you see where the problem will land. Even though I quarreled or disagreed with the Supreme Court position on that, because they were playing the advocate for INEC by advancing reasons that INEC did not advance as to the reliability of the data in the back-end server. They should have allowed INEC to come out and say, look, our back-end server is not reliable because of ABCD. They didn't. It was the Supreme Court that came out to say, oh, the back-end server, the data there is not reliable because INEC may not have done this. They should have allowed INEC, because INEC said we will transfer the data to our back-end server and the data will be safe and complete. But here is the Supreme Court saying, no, that data is not reliable. So on that level, they are going to have problems if they had not got the certification of Beaver's report before it was reconfigured. But don't forget, the petition is not basically on that. There are other
still have the
constitutional requirement and qualification issues that are there.
The legal pundit and political commentator also revealed that the Supreme Court verdict on Osun State gubernatorial elections would not have major impact on the petition of Labour Party candidate Peter Obi at the Election Petition Court. While speaking with our reporter Mike Akatu-Ode, Manta said Labour Party and Peter Obi's petition against Tinubu were anchored on 4 legs, and so the court ruling won't have much effect on the outcome of the Election Petition Tribunal.
Away from the internal crisis of Labour Party, can you tell us a little about the Supreme Court judgment about the Osun State election vis-a-vis Oweleke and Oyetola? How did it went? And we all know the results, but we want to hear your thoughts first.
Yes, as you know, the Supreme Court upheld the judgment of the Court of Appeal, which nullified the judgment of the tribunal that had set aside the election of Oweleke. And the Supreme Court gave some reasons, one of which, in summary, is that the reliance by the APC on INEC's back-end server data was not tenable, that data was not reliable. In fact, I would say that the Supreme Court acted as an advocate for INEC by saying why the data from INEC server was not reliable, that you could only prove overvoting by reference to the original result, which is from EC8A, and the data of accreditation from Beaver's machine.
Okay, let me hold you on there, Barrister. Yes. By this now, it means that the court has technically quenched or extinguished anything that has to do with server. Now, what will that be? What will be the implication of this court ruling on the Peter Obi versus Tinubu at the election tribunal? What will be the implication?
Yes, at the risk of going into the case that is already before the court,
yes,
I still have to state that for me, I have been apprehensive because of that judgment. Because if you remember, when Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi filed the petitions, INEC came to the tribunal and said, look, we want to reconfigure the Beaver's machine to use them in the gubernatorial elections. And there was argument by Peter Obi and Atiku group that, look, you are going to destroy the data from the beavers that we want or we intend to use in our petition. INEC replied that no, we are going to transfer that data is safe. We are going to transfer that data to our back-end server. So no data will be lost. On the basis of that, the Presidential Election Tribunal allowed INEC to reconfigure the beavers machine to use it for the gubernatorial elections. The question now is, with the statement and judgment of the Supreme Court saying that the back-end server data of INEC is not reliable, the issue as to votes in this Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi's petition may be in jeopardy because what they will fall back on is the same data from the back-end server. My criticism of the Supreme Court on that statement is that the court was acting as an advocate of INEC. It is not INEC that we say, look, our data is not reliable, that we did this, we did that to make the data unreliable. The Supreme Court was like holding brief for INEC, and they shouldn't have done that. That's my problem with that. Let INEC come and say, look, our data is not reliable. Then we'll have an issue with INEC. If it's not reliable, why do you have it in the first place?
You see, based on this Osun election again, sir, that means all the data, both from the IRF and from that's IREV, and from, hold it first, Beavers.
The
Beavers. When matters come to head, it will be said that those informations or data are not reliable based on the Supreme Court ruling.
No, what the Supreme Court said is that if you want to prove overvoting, you use the original result, which is from EC8A. You use the data of accreditation from Beavers, which they even term secondary. Secondary.
The Beavers.
Yes, the back-end server, they called it the third source evidence. So the issue now is, as far as part of the petitions that are before the tribunal today, as far as they deal with the issue of the number of votes scored, either here or there, how it should be proved. You can get from EC8A, for instance, but where will you get the data from the Beavers to match it up? Because under the Electoral Act, you will see that the collation officer, for instance, if there's dispute on an election, he is to use the from EC8A, he is to use the data of accreditation, transmitted directly from the polling unit. And that leads me to one of the reasons the Supreme Court stated in Osun case, that there's no law that requires data, the result to be transmitted on the spot to INEC server. I'm surprised because if you go to the Electoral Act, there are copious references of data that was transmitted, data of accredited votes, accredited voters, and of the votes itself that was transmitted directly from the polling unit. I can read section 64.
Please, let's do that.
I can read section 64 to you, just for emphasis, to see where they talk about the transmission of votes or accreditation data directly from the polling station.
To there.
If you look at the from section 64, subsection 4. I'll read it for you.
Please do.
A collection officer or returning officer at an election shall collect and announce the result of an election subject to his or her verification and confirmation that A, the number of accredited voters stated on the collected result are correct and consistent with the number of accredited voters recorded and transmitted directly from polling units under section 47(2) of the Act. Transmitted directly from polling units
to the server.
The same 64(4)(b). The votes stated, the first one I said, the number of accredited voters.
Yes.
And I'm talking about the votes.
The votes.
How the collection officer is to go about it. The votes stated on the collected result are correct and consistent with the votes and results recorded and transmitted directly from polling units under section 64 of this Act. You will see it even in subsection 5. They still repeated it. The accredited voters recorded and transmitted directly from polling units. So there are several references where the Electoral Act is talking about transmission of votes transmission of accredited voters directly from polling units. So when the Supreme Court said there is no law requiring the polling or presiding officer to transmit data and votes in real time, I beg to disagree, because there are copious references. There is even issue that if you have to resolve complaints on an election, if there is dispute, you are to use 3 methods.
Okay.
The form EC8A, the data transmitted directly from the polling stations. Now, the collection center is officer, for instance, is at the collection center trying to announce result in real time. If he did not have the result that was transmitted directly from the polling station, what is he now going to use to resolve the dispute?
Yeah. Now, permit me, sir, in his Chatham House address, the INEC boss, Mahmoud Yakubu, also talked about transmission of results from polling units directly. And like you have quoted from sections of the constitutions, it has also been there. So what the Supreme Court is saying is that these laws and the pronunciation by the chairman of INEC has been rendered irrelevant.
Well, let me add something that I didn't say.
Okay.
The Electoral Act says that after recording and announcing the result, the presiding officer is to transfer the result in a manner prescribed by INEC. Now, the word transfer, if you look at it, it also includes transmit.
Yes.
So, in this case, you can ask the question, what was the prescribed mode of transferring the result at the polling station that INEC did or prescribed? You are all here. INEC have repeatedly assured Nigerians that results will be transmitted
live
and
in real time
from the polling units to their server, and Nigerians would watch
it live.
So it's difficult for me to say or go or agree with what the Supreme Court said, that there is no law that requires the transmission of results, the transmission of accreditation data from the polling station directly to INEC server. Now, if you look at, if you say, okay, the provision requiring the presiding officer to transfer the result in a manner prescribed by the INEC, there is another provision that says after the presiding officer has entered the result and announced it, he is to hand over that result to the INEC official or designated person by INEC. So there are two provisions. One is to hand over. The other is to transfer the result in a manner prescribed by INEC. So you cannot come and say the transfer there is handover, because handover has been taken care of by another section. The transfer there can only refer to transmission of result as announced to Nigerians by INEC.
Barrister, I'm going to put you on a hot spot. Now, going by the Supreme Court pronouncement on the election of Osun State, it is obvious that what it has given by one hand, it has taken with the other hand. It's like it has a dove in one hand and a dagger in the other hand. And that brings us to the question of, can the court or the judiciary be distrusted? If you look at it, most Nigerians have been apprehensive about even Tinubu becoming the president, or Tinubu himself being sworn in before the conclusion of this very electoral case. And secondly, people are not even taking seriously pronouncements from courts anymore. They will tell you that it's like the courts pronounce or judge favorable to the government. They make favorable judgment when it comes to the government versus the opposition. And from what we have just seen from the Oyetola versus Oweleke judgment, the people may be right. I'm putting you on a hotspot.
Well, that is how do I put it? It's a bit sensitive because the cases are ongoing. And to that extent, I'm going to limit my comment. But let me say that the whole problem, the whole lack of trust has been caused exclusively by INEC. In the past, there has been always from EC80, where the presiding officer records the result and gives it to the agent of the parties, gives it to the security agencies that are present. But there has always been rigging. The rigging used to take place between the polling station and the collection centers.
Yes.
In between, everything used to happen. Result used to be changed. A lot of things, even your agents could be bought to resign different from EC80 than the one that they were sent. So the electoral process did not have much confidence. Now, INEC brought the technology that will bypass that difference between the movement from the polling station to the collection center, and thereby clear the time that used to be the time for manipulation of the result. They assured Nigerians that election result will be transmitted in real time directly from the polling station. So people were confident. There were jubilation. They said, look, my vote, nobody's going to tamper with my vote this time around. Because as soon as the result is announced, it's sent directly, electronically.
Yes.
And don't forget that the electoral act also requires INEC
To transmit.
to maintain an electronic register at its headquarters
Yes.
of all votes and accredited data transmitted from the polling unit to polling unit.
Yes.
So these things gave confidence to Nigerians that this time around their vote will count and that it will be difficult, if not impossible, to manipulate the electoral process. Lo and behold, we saw something different. And up to today, INEC has not given any credible reason why the results were not transmitted.
The presidential results.
The presidential result, because the other results, National Assembly, were being transmitted. INEC has failed to give credible reason why these results of the presidential election were not transmitted live. That gave room for all manner of speculations. And from the way we see things and the way we hear, a lot of things have happened. Nobody can say that the elections are free and fair, because the APC that won are alleging rigging in some places in the southwest, southeast, for instance.
Yes.
So if that is true, it simply means that the elections were not free and fair.
It's not free and fair.
PDP is complaining, Labour Party is complaining, APC are complaining. So if any of them is correct, if there was rigging in the southeast, it means the system was not perfect, means the system was manipulated. And if the system was manipulated in one place, it could also be manipulated in another place.
But in this case, the Supreme Court, which was supposed to be the guardian of Nigeria, the chief arbiter, and the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be the final say, in honesty, seems to have put a spanner in the works by this Oyetola versus Oweleke judgment. So how do you see Nigerians reacting on this very case? Already, many are saying that Peter Obi's case will be considerably affected by this very judgment. Once more, let's take your point or your views.
I wouldn't go as far as saying that the Supreme Court has put a spanner in these issues. My gross with the statement of the Supreme Court is that they became the advocates for INEC.
And
they said,
by the barrister, the Supreme Court rulings are final.
Yeah, we know that. And they are precedent. They are binding on all courts. They started giving reasons why the data from INEC server was not reliable. They said poor internet, it could be because of poor internet, loss of battery power, failure of INEC officials to properly press the buttons, the submit buttons. These are the reasons stated by the Supreme Court. I would have expected INEC to be the one saying that don't rely on this our data because of ABCD.
Yes.
And then we will question them. If that data is not, why did you assure Nigerians that they should go there and find the votes, check the votes? But here it is the Supreme Court that is giving these reasons. So I have issue with that.
Okay.
I have issue with that. And when INEC came to the presidential tribunal, they said we are going to reconfigure our beavers, but the data is not going to be lost. All the data is saved on our back-end server. So juxtapose that statement with the statement of the Supreme Court that data is not reliable because of ABCD.
So are we not saying the Supreme Court is playing a script that may favor the government and the ruling party and probably the president-elect?
Well, I will not go as far as saying
you are a lawyer.
I'm a lawyer. I would not go as far as saying that, because one, it benefited, the judgment was in favor of the opposition,
the PDP
in the Osun State. And secondly, the petition that has been filed has 3 legs. That is, the first leg is the issue of votes, whether somebody got majority of votes. Mm-hmm. And this is always the most difficult part to prove, because the Electoral Act says that before an election can be set aside, it must be proved that there was substantial non-compliance with the Electoral Act. It's not just mere non-compliance. Okay. You cannot just say, okay, because this was not recorded here, this one, it has to be substantial as affecting the final result.
The final result.
Of course, when it is on vote issue, if you can show that where these things not done, or if these votes are cancelled, the resulting situation will be that the votes the person got will no longer be majority votes. That is an issue that cannot be ignored. But like I said, the petition appears to be principally on three legs. One, the issue of majority votes. 4 legs, let me say 4 legs.
Okay.
One, the issue of majority of lawful votes. 2, the issue of acquiring the citizenship of another country or pledging allegiance to another country. 3, the issue of being fined for an offense involving dishonesty or fraud. And 4th, the issue of whether somebody has scored 25% of the votes
so that
in the FCT.
Right. So in your own opinion, as a legal expert, a legal pundit, it will mean that the Supreme Court judgment on Osun State will affect less the judgment, the coming judgment on Atiku, Tinubu, and Peter Obi, precisely Peter Obi.
The judgment of the Supreme Court in Osun State, insofar as the petitions pending at the Presidential Tribunal are concerned, will most probably be relevant and affect the part of the petition that deals with the issue of votes.
Especially the beavers.
Especially the
beavers and the
data that is supposed to be captured in the beavers. Because if you are saying in Rivers, Obi scored it was reduced to this, the only way from what the Supreme Court said is to bring the from EC80, bring the data from the beavers itself.
And that is where the
problem
nullified.
That is where the problem will come. Bring the data, don't bring us the data from the back end server. Bring the data from the beavers, bring the original result from EC80 for purposes of comparison and knowing the number of accredited voters vis-a-vis the number of people who voted. To that extent, that portion of the petition will be affected.
But the other legs, the
other legs are not.
They are insulated.
They are not affected because they were not part of the judgment of the Supreme Court in Osun case.
All right. Barrister, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Barrister Manta, and thanks to our reporter, Mike Akatuode. To enjoy more amazing interviews, please follow us on our social media handles at Oweleketv and on our website at oweleketv. I am Confidence Oko. Thank you for watching.